Mausoleum of the First Qin Emperor looks inevitable in hindsight, but every major turning point was once an open choice. That is the familiar edge of the story, not the whole of it. The deeper question is how geography, resources, institutions, rival decisions, and ordinary people carried Mausoleum of the First Qin Emperor toward that moment. Follow those pressures in sequence, and the famous image stops being an isolated legend. It becomes the visible result of choices that could still have ended differently. Begin where the people inside Mausoleum of the First Qin Emperor had to begin, with the physical setting and the first dated traces. Then move through expansion, pressure, conflict, adaptation, collapse, or survival without skipping the links between them. Objects, buildings, inscriptions, landscapes, and written accounts will not always agree. Those disagreements are useful because they reveal which parts are secure, which depend on later memory, and where the strongest competing explanation still survives. China's first emperor ordered a vast burial complex guarded by thousands of life-sized terracotta soldiers. The clash itself was only one part of the contest. Supply, terrain, allies, ships, money, and the ability to replace losses determined whether victory could change the war. What happened next reveals whether this was a temporary advantage or a change strong enough to reshape the choices available to everyone around it. The Terracotta Army fills out a burial pits, while the Emperor's central tomb chamber remains unexcavated. A campaign could destabilize the system behind it. Unpaid troops, exhausted allies, debt, and rival commanders often carried conflict back into domestic politics. For the people living through it, the shift appeared as work, food, tax, danger, movement, status, or protection long before it became a sentence in a chronicle. Bronze chariots, weapons, and thousands of individually modeled soldiers reveal the labor organized around the burial complex. Military power reached far beyond the battlefield. Recruitment, pay, transport, and obligations to allied communities shaped what a commander could attempt and how long the effort could continue. The scale is visible in repetition. One trace can show contact, while the same pattern across several secure contexts points to an organized system. Archaeologists can map the surrounding pits and walls without opening the tomb mound, preserving evidence that cannot be replaced. Architecture turns policy into a physical commitment. Materials must arrive, skilled work must be coordinated, and the structure must keep functioning after the ceremony ends. This is where the public image and daily reality meet, because a decision only became history when other people built it, funded it, enforced it, or resisted it. It was constructed over 38 years from 246 to 208 BC and is situated underneath a 76-meter-tall, 249 ft tomb mound shaped like a truncated pyramid. What survives is the final layer of a longer process of quarrying, transport, measurement, labor, repair, and control over access. The turning point was not automatic. Different choices remained open, and each depended on resources, information, alliances, and risks that were unevenly shared. The main tomb chamber housing the coffin and burial artifacts is the core of the architectural complex of the mausoleum. Burial choices concentrate belief, rank, family memory, labor, and access to wealth, yet an elite tomb can never stand in for every person in the society. Independent sources do not need to tell the same story in the same words. Confidence rises when different kinds of evidence converge on the same sequence. Archaeological explorations currently concentrate on various sites of the extensive necropolis surrounding the tomb. Grave goods and human remains answer different questions, so status, health, migration, ritual, and cause of death must not be collapsed into one dramatic conclusion. The consequence matters more than the slogan because it shows who gained room to act, who lost it, and which pressure carried into the next stage. The Terracotta Army served as a garrison to the mausoleum and has yet to be completely excavated. After the fighting, the decisive question was whether military success could become durable political control without exhausting the system that produced it. A dramatic interpretation is strongest when the missing motive or conversation is left missing instead of being filled with invented certainty. Work on the mausoleum began soon after Emperor Qin ascended the throne in 246 BCE when he was still aged 13. The missing grave matter too because preservation, later disturbance, and unequal treatment can distort which lives into the archaeological record. The next generation inherited more than the event itself. It inherited damaged or protected roots, institutions, memories, skills, and political limits. Palaces and scenic towers for 100 officials were constructed, and the tomb was filled with rare artifacts and wonderful treasure. Rebuilding and reuse are part of the story because later rulers often changed an older monument while borrowing the authority already attached to its site. That longer afterlife explains why a decision that looked successful in the moment could create a vulnerability visible only years later. Zhang Han redeployed all the 700,000 people building the mausoleum to suppress the rebellion, so construction of the mausoleum ceased. Transport belongs inside the design story. The chosen material matters together with the route, season, tools, and repeated effort required to move it into position. The strongest rival explanation must account for the same dates, material traces, and practical limits rather than surviving only because it sounds possible. No solid evidence of the destruction of the tomb has been found, although evidence of fire damage has been found in the pits housing the Terracotta Army. Defeat changed bargaining power immediately. Peace terms, indemnities, surrendered territory, and limits on future action could reshape a state long after the armies left the field. At human scale, the result was not abstract. It altered where people could live, travel, worship, trade, serve, speak, or remain safe. Professor Duan Qingbo, who was the archaeological team leader of the Mausoleum of the First Emperor for more than 10 years. Burial choices concentrate belief, rank, family memory, labor, and access to wealth, yet an elite tomb can never stand in for every person in the society. The surviving record favors durable objects and powerful voices, so silence must be treated as missing evidence rather than automatic proof of absence. The first fragments of warriors and bronze arrowheads were discovered by Yang Zhifa, his 5 brothers, and Wang Puzhe, who were digging a well in March 1974 in Xi'an. Military memory became political material. Later writers and leaders could turn an old enemy, victory, or humiliation into an argument for new policy in their own time. Follow this clue into the next dated change, because consequence is the bridge that turns an isolated fact into a coherent historical story. The cleanest explanation of Mausoleum of the First Qin Emperor is not automatically the strongest one. Put the leading account beside its best rival and ask what each predicts about dates, routes, damage, settlement, written testimony, and human behavior. The better explanation should cover more of those independent traces with fewer unsupported assumptions. Where both still fit, the disagreement belongs in the conclusion instead of being hidden for the sake of a smoother story. Now follow Mausoleum of the First Qin Emperor beyond its famous turning point. Separate the immediate result from the institutions, roots, memories, technologies, communities, or political limits that survived into the next generation. That longer view often reverses the simple verdict of victory or defeat. It shows whether the event transformed a system, interrupted it briefly, or created a new problem that later rulers inherited without fully understanding its origin. The remaining uncertainty around Mausoleum of the First Qin Emperor is not a failure of the story. It is a boundary around what the sources can support. Strong history marks that boundary clearly, compares rival explanations, and avoids filling silence with invented certainty. That honesty makes the confirmed evidence more powerful, not less dramatic. It also identifies the next inscription, layer, date, or scientific test that could genuinely change the conclusion. The lasting importance of Mausoleum of the First Qin Emperor is not one isolated fact. It is the relationship between physical evidence, organized power, human choices, and the consequences that followed. Once those layers are kept together, the past stops looking like a legend and starts looking like people solving problems under pressure with imperfect information. Return to the opening clue and notice how much more precisely its meaning can now be stated.